Welcome to the Liberace Mansion.
Welcome to Under the Vegas Sun, looking at the people, the events, and the news surrounding Las Vegas and the entire Vegas Valley. Hello, I'm Steve Schorr. We are live from the Liberace Mansion. Before we begin, we want to congratulate incoming Governor Steve Sisolak and all of the candidates who won recent elections here in Nevada. Without a doubt, Nevada is changing. Without a doubt, a lot of things will be changing. But it will be interesting what happens during the next legislative session and how that rolls out to the general public. On our program today, though, a little bit of a serious note. Some of the things that are going on in America are really raising a lot of questions. One of those issues deals with substance abuse, the various kinds of substance abuse. On our program today, we'll talk about that, talk about what's being done and what needs to be done. That's our program. You'll meet a man who's very much involved in that issue in just a few seconds. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Frankie Shinta, downtown's king of entertainment. You're watching Under the Vegas Sun with Steve Schorr.
They say statistics don't tell a lie. 21.5 million adults today have some form of substance abuse. Substance abuse is something that a lot of people talk about, but don't understand. On our program today, we're going to get into this whole situation with substance abuse with a man who has founded two of the very, very successful efforts in Las Vegas. One is called Freedom House, the other Crossroads. He is Jeff Iverson. Welcome to our program, Jeff.
Thank you, Steve. It's nice to be here.
Statistics are and can be anything that you say they are. But the fact is that there are 21.5 million adults now facing some form of substance abuse, whether it be alcohol or drugs, some form of substance abuse. That's a tough number to deal with. You deal with it on a daily basis. Is it a situation that surprises you, that you look at and go, how is it we haven't controlled this yet? Or is it a situation that we just have to accept and move on?
Well, Steve, thanks for having me here today, and I am honored to be here with you. I think that it's a situation that is tough to accept. I think it's a situation that's not going to go away, and I know that there is a tremendous amount of well-intentioned and good-hearted people out there doing everything that they know how to do to try to combat it. Here locally, I don't think the problem's any worse than other parts of the country, but I'm just, my personal story causes me to be especially passionate about this issue.
But before we move into that, this whole situation of Las Vegas not being more involved or having a greater number than other cities do. But the fact is, there are pressures in Las Vegas.
Sure.
There are things in Las Vegas by its own nature that I would think creates a greater opportunity for two things: substance abuse and mental health issues. And I think that combination, maybe our statistics are not as big as some might think, but I would think it would bring about more of those two things, mental health issues and substance abuse, than any other city of comparable size to us. Yes or no?
That's a tough question. I mean, on the surface, of course I want to say yes. I mean, I was born and raised here. And so I think that some of the ways of life in Las Vegas are very intriguing and bring a lot of that substance abuse on. It could even be, there could be some gambling attached to that, other things. And then it's kind of easy to have a little bit of mental illness when life isn't going so well, depression and some other things. So I think what you're saying is probably pretty accurate.
I mean, statistically, let's go back to the statistics.
Yeah.
Statistically, it is said that of the 21.5 million adults that have substance abuse, of that number, nearly 25% have additional mental health issues.
I believe that.
That you do believe?
Absolutely. I believe the number is even higher.
Really?
Yeah. Yes.
By your experiences?
By my experience.
There is a lot said. The audience knows quite well that there's a lot said today about the latest form of substance abuse that gains the most amount of headlines, which is opioid abuse. Opioid abuse often leads to the next step, which is heroin abuse. I personally worry that we overreact on the opioid abuse and harm a lot of people where opioids are the difference between them being able to move and to deal with whatever chronic illness they have,
right,
and us as a nation trying to deal with the amount of abuse. You've got to see opioid abuse in what you do. How do you balance out that of substance abuse, dealing with cocaine, heroin, and the rest, and that which is the abuse of medications and medical? Well, that's another one.
That's a big question, because I personally know plenty of people who legitimately need pain management in their life, and part of that is taking opiates. What I feel a responsibility towards is, if somebody has become addicted, helping them become unaddicted. I don't think I'm really entitled to have an opinion about somebody that's legitimately using opiates until they've identified that it's become a problem in their life. I think what we're seeing is all the attention brought around the opioid epidemic has to do with things that may have been intentionally done to make it easier for people to get their hands on more. And I think that's, from a prevention standpoint, the uproar has to do with that. Like, is it overprescribed? Are doctors safely prescribing and monitoring people that are, is an opiate an acceptable long-term medication for pain relief? And those, I'm not here to
judge that.
Mm-hmm. What I want to do is, what I'm seeing, especially with the younger generation, is a lot of them, some of them, it's a sports injury, and they start taking the meds, and then they become addicted, and then ultimately, heroin is a cheaper, easier to get on the street alternative, and that's how a lot of these youngsters are getting, becoming addicted to heroin. And so that's where I want to jump in and be able to offer some assistance.
Okay. I'm a kid of the 60s, and being a kid of the 60s, those who were involved in heroin, because cocaine wasn't a big discussion back then. Meth wasn't even around back then.
Sure.
Heroin was the thing that it was unacceptable. Marijuana. I was at Woodstock, and marijuana, although it was at things like that, still wasn't an acceptable situation for most young people at the time.
Right.
Today, in this past election, even more states have now legitimized medical marijuana and marijuana. Is there a correlation that we should think about, or is it education more than correlation? Silence.
I think part of it is education and part of it's correlation. And a lot of my opinions I have to draw on my own personal experiences, right, to formulate. And I can see where substances were used for fun, and then I can look back and see when I crossed the line and I actually became addicted. And I think part of it was accessibility, and part of it was I was uneducated about the possible harms and effects that that path could lead me down.
But you founded 2 facilities. You see it most every day, abuse. But yet at the same time, we see the proliferation of marijuana in this community, in California, in neighboring states. And as much as we believe that it's still something that should be legalized, there are questions to be raised.
Sure, absolutely.
How do we do that without nullifying all the good that's out there for that?
I think we have sensible conversations.
Easier said than done.
Which are sometimes extremely difficult to
Easier
do.
said than done.
Absolutely. You know, I happen to think believe that one of the most dangerous drugs out there is alcohol. Most accessible, readily available.
And yet we don't talk about that.
No,
We don't talk about how that leads to other things.
Sure.
But yet it becomes part and parcel of all the things that you are dealing with at your group.
Sure. I mean, how socially acceptable is alcohol, even alcohol abuse? You know, alcoholism is a little bit taboo.
Yeah. Don't drive under the influence is the biggest, toughest thing we say.
Right.
Biggest, toughest thing we say.
You know,
Don't become a DUI.
alcohol and its tentacles reach into so many different aspects of people's lives.
You know,
And
we've skirted around the issue. We're going to take a break for a couple of seconds. When we come back, I want to talk about March 28th of 2006 and why that date is so important and how that date literally changed your life.
Okay.
We'll talk about that again. Amazing man who deals with all of this on a daily basis, and when you hear his story, you'll understand why. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Hello, my name is Martin Ravenhill. I am the proprietor, owner of the Liberace Mansion, and I welcome you and invite you to explore all of the incredible features we have available at this historic house. Liberace lived here from 1974 until his death in 1987. Since then, I've been able to remodel and restore this house to its former glory. Here we have 15,000 square feet of amazing historic space available for weddings, ceremonies, corporate events, and charity fundraisers. The Liberace Mansion. There is no place like it in the world.
Are we at a crisis in our community, in communities around the country, because of substance abuse? Our very special guest once again, Jeff Iverson, very much involved, founded 2 organizations in Las Vegas, and is a man who's dedicated himself to it. March 28th, 2006. Important date for you. An important date that changed your life after at least a few decades of struggle.
Yes, sir.
Why that date?
March 28th of 2006, I woke up in the Clark County Detention Center, and I was ready to make a decision. I had hit a rock bottom sufficient enough to convince me that I needed to do something different.
Is it a place that sometimes people have to hit in order to make that change? My personal belief, this is just my belief, is that there was always that Jeff Iverson that I see sitting across from me today inside. That Jeff Iverson was always there. That Jeff
Absolutely.
Iverson never was any different. But it was because of what you had become for a couple of decades that didn't allow that Jeff Iverson to flourish again.
Correct.
Do you have to get so low for that to happen? Or through Freedom House and through Crossroads, have you found better ways before they get to that spot to be able to, I mean, listen, I look at you and you're one of the biggest successes I know. I mean, you're president of a major limousine company here in Las Vegas. President of since 2006, when you said enough was enough. You founded 2 facilities in Las Vegas, Freedom House and Crossroads, on your own. You're an amazing story. You have to be a great example for those who want to be the Jeff Iversons of tomorrow and get themselves out of this hole.
I share my story frequently with people that are struggling, and people struggle on all different levels, and people come from all different socioeconomic backgrounds. And I mean, I've sat and chatted with judges about struggles, and attorneys, and doctors, and I've sat and shared my story with people that have been on the streets for years, some of them living in the tunnels underneath Las Vegas. The thing we have in common is we became addicted, and that's a tough thing for a lot of us to swallow with our pride and ego, right? So in answering your question, do we all have to get to the kind of a low or the rock bottom that I hit? No. It's entirely possible for somebody to identify that drugs or alcohol are causing problems. And a lot of people are able to pull back and with less intensive services, change their life.
I know you, and I know the proudest part of you is not only founding these 2 great organizations that are making a difference, but the proudest part of you is being 3 letters.
Yeah, that's right.
Dad.
Dad.
When you look at your children, how do you sense and how do you feel so they don't go through the struggles of life that Dad went through?
That's a great question too. And it's something I ponder on frequently. Part of it is me understanding and accepting they're here on their own journey. And I'm going to let them have their journey.
Really?
Of course. I can draw on my own experiences, and I can look back and think of things that could have been different in how I was brought up, things to look for, warning signs, especially early warning signs of maybe some things amiss. And I'll draw on all those experiences in how I deal with my kids, but they're going to have their journey, and there's a high probability they might experiment with substances at some point in their life. And I want them to love and trust me enough and know enough about my story to be comfortable talking to me about what's going on. I think,
You have right now people out watching you.
Yeah.
and me who maybe have a spouse, a friend, a lover, a child, who they know is facing a struggle.
Yeah.
What do you say to them, Jeff? What advice can you give them before that friend, spouse, lover, child faces their March 28th of 2006?
I'm kind of speechless, and I'll tell you why. It's a really, really tough situation to be in. Realizing you have no control is not something anybody wants to go through. There was a point where my mom and my dad had to realize they had no control of the choices and actions I was making. The most general thing I could say in response to your question is there's hope. There's hope, and people that are struggling need to know that they are unconditionally loved and supported. But I think that there's things that we can do to people or for people that will enable them to continue to make bad choices. And I think that's the biggest thing to take a look at is, am I enabling a behavior that I'm afraid of?
Or ignoring it.
Or am I willing to just look the other way and kind of be in denial and pretend it's not happening? I think that's easy for a lot of people to do.
Do things like drug courts help? Do things like people like the judges who've seen people come before them facing their own March 28th, does that help?
Absolutely.
It does.
I'm a huge advocate for specialty court programs.
Because it can make a difference?
They make a huge difference.
Do they send people to places like Freedom House and Crossroads?
Absolutely they do. And I got to tell you, there's teams of people working extremely hard that don't ever get the credit or recognition that they probably deserve. Literally teams of people working hard to create opportunities for people to embrace a process for change.
Love's a tough thing.
Mm-hmm.
Tough love is even tougher, I believe.
Yeah.
And as a parent, as somebody who's seen friends go through this, I know that one of the worst things you can do is give up on people.
For sure.
Because once you give up on people, the opportunity for them to give up on themselves becomes even greater.
Absolutely.
So people have to reach out to people like Jeff Iverson and Freedom House and Crossroads before it gets to that point, and not just give up. I'm sure your parents at some point almost gave up. And now look at you. You amaze me, my friend. You amaze me where you have become and what you have done in your life. But I know that it's day to day, isn't it?
My recovery is absolutely day to day.
Day to day.
And I definitely have to separate my professional life and the projects I'm involved with in creating opportunities for people to embrace change I have to be able to separate that from my own personal program of recovery. Prior to March 28th of 2006, I was trying to get clean and change my life for 6 years. That was a 6-year process of discovering how powerless I am and how unmanageable my life was. And pride and ego have a lot to do with getting in the way of somebody's, ability to change. And so the reason I had to hit so many rock bottoms was I thought I had better ideas than the people around me, And I was really trying to fight hard for my right to use some substances recreationally, like I saw other people doing, I wanted to be them. Who wants to believe that they're mentally different? And so I had to come to terms with my reality. And when I did, through a series of those rock bottoms, I finally became willing to try something.
And you achieved it.
I did.
And you achieved it.
I didn't do it alone.
But your life is a wonderful example of what the power of self. And I believe that you are a great example of that. And
Thank you.
I think if people listen to you on this program, they can see what they can do. And I'll reiterate what you said before, and that is don't give up.
Don't give up.
And don't ignore it, and take action.
Right.
And you're a great example of that. My friend, thank you very much for being with us on the program.
Thank you.
You've been very insightful, and I truly appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
I think for everybody else, don't ignore it. Don't let it just go by. Contact people like Jeff, contact people like Freedom House, contact people like Crossroads. Don't ever let it just go, because it'll never change if you just let it go. And change is a good thing.
That's right.
Right back with some final words in just a few seconds. Taking place is not waning, as we said, as most people thought. And in the coming weeks, we'll have some people on the program to specifically talk about substance abuse and its impact on young people. That'll be in weeks ahead. Until next week, I'm Steve Schorr. Be safe and enjoy life under the Vegas sun.